Waiting here for everything to work. Amazing. It worked. We are live. Thank you so much. Hello, Nidhi. Hello, Billy Jitsu. Hello, Metis community. Hello, API3 community. Hello, any developer that might be watching this. Today we have a very special live streaming event with Billy Jitsu. I I can't wait for this. Billy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Good. It's gonna be the first time we're doing the Aave deployment on Metis, so a little nervous because we're gonna do it live, and so we'll see what happens and what goes wrong, and you guys will ask questions throughout the way. But looking really forward, like to see a lot of the developers actually deploy their own borrow lending dApp, experiment with it, understand why the oracles are play the role they do, and teach something that really doesn't get taught in the space, right? We hear a lot of things that, oh, you could do this, learn DeFi, blah, blah, blah. Well, right here, we're doing it, right? Where you can actually experiment with your own borrow lending dApp. I'll get into the details as we go forward, but really excited to get this up and running.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. When you first told me about this idea, I thought, man, I don't think that that's kind of a straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Aave should be a complicated protocol. There might be many tweaks that you might have to do. So the fact that you're going to be doing this live shows that you are really a ninja developer, and I'm happy that I'm connected with you and that you are also building on Metis and helping us bring in these like tools that we really need to provide for our developers, and there are so many things that we can do. So yeah, do you think that we should start by sharing the screen here, or
Yeah.
maybe asking first our people to do some retweets, or else we don't do anything? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's go ahead and share the screen as we're going. I'm not sure if I see it on the Twitter going live yet, so I can retweet it. I'm not seeing it. Is under Metis or Metis developers?
It should be under Metis developers. The problem is that for some reason, when this start like sharing from the account when it's connected via StreamYard, which is the platform that we are using,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't see very clearly like the image with the video and the link, So
Yeah.
it actually says building DeFi solutions on Metis L2, deploying an Aave fork with API3. And then you have the link, so if you check out the Metis developers account, you should be able to see it. And we're going to be asking for some extra support to our community, right? And yeah, I think that we are good to go. So we have also Nidhi here, who recently joined DevRel, and she's going to be also helping us in the background to activate the community, make sure that all of the developers are watching. And well, in any case, this material stays there, and you can watch it later. But of course, we want to have the interaction, right? Like the live interaction is a very important component. So if you have
Yep.
any sort of questions, please feel free to ask. You can ask on the YouTube live stream. You can ask to us on the Metis developers account. You can ask me. You can ask Billy Jitsu. We are all day on X, so we are pretty easy to find. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead and share my screen, Victor. Should be
All
good to
right.
go. Boom, beautiful. Okay, so if you haven't been paying attention, we are 3 workshops in. We are API3. We are a price feed oracle essentially on here. So for those that don't know who I am, I'm Billy Jitsu. I'm API3's lead developer relations. You can follow me on socials to keep up to date with what API3 is up to or my shenanigans or whatever I'm up to. I'm always into something else, sometimes DeFi, something creative. So, shoot me a follow if that interests you. So, just to backtrack, our first workshop with Metis was the fundamentals of API3, how to get a price feed to your smart contract, how oracles work, learn to use an adapter for your code base if you're using a different oracle. That's actually what we're going to be using today. So, Aave is a basically a borrow lending dApp that used a different oracle, and so we didn't want to like refactor that code. We're just basically going to fork it and then adjust it for API3 oracles. So we ended up using that adapter. If you want more details on that adapter, definitely check out workshop number 1. And then the second workshop was about Oracle extractable value, how push and pull oracles work, the differences of each one, how the OEV network plays, why its advantage is really good for like a borrow lending dApp to use API3 oracles to not lose that liquidation value over time, and then the ability to kind of do like MEV on training wheels on a layer 2. right? And so today we have our third workshop, which is going to be split into two because it's pretty long to do everything all in one. So third workshop A and B is we're actually going to learn to deploy Aave fork via a CLI tool built by the API3 team. That is really hefty, really good. So we've extracted a lot of the issues, a lot of the deployment issues on there, and just kind of basically made it really as simple as possible to be able to use the adapters, get it set up, and then have it deployed through your system on here. And then on B, we're going to learn how to liquidate a position using the OAV network. So you're going to monitor the available positions. You're going to see how much profit you can make. You're going to bid on the OAV network that we did on workshop 2. We're going to update that price and we're going to do a liquidation. So if this is your first workshop, definitely check back on the Metis YouTube and check out the first workshop and the second workshop. Then,
so this is a question that I want to emphasize, which is, let's assume that this is like kind of the first time that I'm watching this, and I'm wondering what are the requirements. So what you recommend is just go and watch the entire first and like the first 2 episodes. Is that correct?
yes, yeah. So the first one is really, really easy because we are just using Remix and just messing around with the oracles, getting to play with it. The second one, we are using VS Code and using a repo that's using JavaScript and some smart contract, where you learn a little bit about multi-call, and I have repos that show you how to do each one of those things. And so now we're going into the big jump of like using Aave, but we've extracted all those issues and then understanding how the proxy oracles work, how we're using the adapters, why we're using that. If you're coming into this workshop directly, I'm going to try to explain it, but you're going to be able to understand it way better if you watch the first 2 videos. And then as we get into the liquidations.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the fourth workshop, right, we're going to cover flash loans, right? Like let's say there is a liquidation. We learn how to do liquidations on workshop 3. That assumes that we have the money available at hand, right? Like let's say you see $1 million or $10 million liquidation. I don't know too many developers that have $10 million available of liquidity at any given chain. So there's flash loans where you can borrow that amount of money, pay back the debt, and then keep the profit of what you get, which is usually 5 to 10%. And then you can put it all together where we put the flash loan, the borrow lending, the OEV, and liquidation, and we put it all together in that fourth final workshop of B, where it's all like you've watched all the videos and now you're a master of liquidations. We put it all together in a single package here. So enough of that. Deploy your own Aave fork with API3 CLI tool is the whole purpose of today. So workshop breakdown is the key learning points is how borrow lending works, right? I'm assuming nobody really understands DeFi. DeFi theoretically is like a niche of a niche in this space sometimes. So you're going to learn how over collateralization loans work, LTV. How does the platform stay healthy, right? How does Aave make money? How does it stay healthy, right? We're going to understand that. We're going to understand the fork deployment, right? Using API3 adapters for legacy code, right? It was built using a different oracle. We don't want to refactor that. We want to just, use the code and then use our API3 oracles. So we're going to see those adapters, and then we're actually going to deposit a position and then borrow something out of it. So what's a borrow lending dApp? Basic mechanics. Basically allows you users, us, to deposit our assets and earn a bit of yield, right? So if I have USDC, if I have ETH, if I have Metis, I don't want to just sit in my wallet. I'm saying, you know what? I want to generate some money. Let me put it somewhere where it can generate some income for me, right? Just like a bank, you put it in a CD, they do something, they lend it out for you. You can deposit it into like a borrow lending dApp, like Aave or Compound or any of those, those kind of borrow lending assets and earn some yield, right? So by having the users deposit, the bank, theoretically, the borrow lending dApp can then lend those assets out to users that want to borrow them, right? So if I want to borrow, $100 of USDC, if the bank has it, I can borrow that out, right? But in order to be able to borrow assets, you have to deposit something more valuable than what you're borrowing, right? It's called over collateralization. So if I want to borrow $100 of something, I have to be able to borrow a deposit, let's say about $150 worth of something else. So I have to deposit $150 and then to be able to borrow $100 worth, because it has to keep me honest, right? So we have over collateralized. If I borrowed without having to pay it back, like just under collateralized, what keeps me from just taking the money and saying bye, sending it to another wallet and saying, peace, thanks a lot, right? So in order to keep me healthy, I need something to lose in order to pay it back, to be honest, right? So we have to have a little skin in the game. So the borrowing rate is usually higher than the lending rate. So that's where the yield comes from, right? So if I'm depositing $1,000 of USDC and it's 5%, I make 5% on that yearly. the borrow rate is going to probably be 8 or 9%. So therefore, they're taking that 8-9%, they're giving 5% to the person that's getting the yield, right? So that's there. And then the difference, it's what's Aave's keeping, and to keep the platform healthy, incentives, keep the lights on, in essence. Make sense so far?
So far, so good. I hope people are paying attention because sometimes these very basic DeFi concepts, like many
Yeah.
times people just don't get it. And then of course it's much more difficult to understand the code if you don't get like the basic idea, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, but we're going to do it live too, just to understand it. But hopefully, if you have any questions, just ask away. So how much does it know to lend, right? And this is where it comes down to. Again, like we said before, EVM doesn't understand what the price value of ETH is, or what Metis is, or anything like that. It's not like a Uniswap liquidity position where it's like apples and oranges, and depending on how many apples and how many oranges are in the liquidity pool, that's the rate. Oracles are based on USD value, right? So that's why you need an oracle in order to be able to lend. So if I have $2,000 worth of ETH, well, how much is that, right? The oracle determines what that is. So that's why it's very important to have a solid oracle that doesn't mess up and give you a misprice, because that's detrimental, that we've seen in the past, right? So average loan, it depends on the risk value is about 70% of your total value deposit. So if I deposit $1,000 worth of something, I can borrow about $700 worth of whatever asset it is. Right. Again, like I said, ETH doesn't know what the value is in US dollars. So that's why it refers to the oracle. Different assets have different risks, right? So if I'm, using ETH as an example, it's pretty well established. It's got a lot of liquidity worldwide. Different chains have all kinds of stuff. But if I'm doing, some random, let's say meme token, right, that only has a liquidity pool of $1 million, well, that's very risky, right? Like it's not worth, a flash loan can manipulate that price. So we have to go with something that's established. But depending on how much token, how much uses it has different risks. Like let's say the Aave token is well established, but is it as established as ETH? Am I willing to risk a price against that? So that's something that's kind of like voted by the DAOs. As the owners can set that if you want to. Right? Health factor determines your health position, right? So health factor is basically how much you've deposited, how much loan to value you have, which is usually around 70 or 75%, and then how much debt you have divided by how much debt. And based on that, that is going to be your health factor. You're going to see it on the front end as well. And then also something to note, Aave V2, it measures against ETH values. So we have to use conversions to USD calculations. So it's going based off the ETH value of whatever it was. And then in order to see something in US dollars, we have to do some conversions in the back end.
So do you have any idea like about all of the details that are behind defining what is a health factor? Because I can imagine that there can be nuances, right? Like uh,
Well, let me pop this in really quick. This is the classic formula of the value and liquidation threshold. So I'm just gonna take a quick pen and kind of draw it horribly. So let's say you do $1,000, right? Really quick, and this is a horrible $1,000, and it's gonna be times the liquidation threshold. So let's say that's 75% right here. And so I've borrowed $700, let's say. I have a 5% change in price before my health factor turns to a certain range, right? So let me just grab the calculator really quick here. So we could, let me switch this back to the mouse and grab the calc. And so we're doing 1,000 times 0.75,
yeah.
750, and then I'm going to divide that by 700. And then have a health factor of 1.07. So just for general notes, for that, no one that's ever used DeFi, if your health factor is above 1, you're in good shape. If your health
Uh-huh.
factor
Okay.
is 1 and below, you're in a liquidatable position. Like I can liquidate you. Anybody in the world could, right? So you want to make sure that your deposit is higher, obviously higher, but based on how much the bank is willing to lend you at, right? 75% of your value. So that's kind of like a quick, introduction into that. I don't want to get too detailed into that just yet. But just wanted since your question had it, I figured I'd answer it. on there.
Yeah, no, you have everything prepared, huh?
It's all in there. There's a lot to cover, so that's why I want to make sure you have it. So let me just put this here. Here is the structure of the contract. So like when you look at the Aave contract, right, it is chaotic, right? There's tons of folders all over the place. But if you look at the Aave docs, they have something very similar to this, right? And you see that the user interacts mostly with what the contract is the lending pool, right? So in the lending pool, we have the deposit functions, the withdraw, borrow, repay, swap, trade assets, flash loans, and liquidate. They all interact with the lending pool. So most of our interactions in the smart contracts, liquidations, they're all going to interact with this. But it has a whole ecosystem of contracts that it all interacts with. If you look at the imports, you're going to see import of interface of this. It's a long list of stuff. And if you sit down and like look at it piece by piece, it'll start to make sense. But this overview will tell you what, how it works. You'll see that it has a configurations, it has a lending rate oracle, like what's the oracle to lend a rate based on wrapped BTC versus wrapped ETH versus USDC, right? There's an oracle for that. There's an oracle's proxy. Where is the price that it's getting from in USDC? This is the format that it goes. So this is what we're using, right? But we're creating a little bit of an adapter in order to not change this. And then it also has A tokens, right? If anybody's ever deposited into Aave, you're going to get an A token that's basically the receipt of how much you deposit, right? So if I deposited USDC in my wallet, I'm going to see the same amount in AUSDC. So I have these old tokens. What's really beautiful about this whole thing is I can deposit it on Aave, right? And now I have these A tokens. That is still an asset that I can leverage somewhere else, right? I can leverage that position that's earning yield in another position. So that's kind of like the beauty of DeFi. Even though I put my money here, I have these receipts that have this value. I could take it over to another, lending protocol and it says, hey, we can leverage your AUSDC tokens for something else and earn yield on top of that. And that's kind of like the beauty of DeFi. You can Lego block your way through a whole bunch of things, but it all starts on this A token contract. And then we have these debt variables, right? They have debt tokens as well. So if I borrow out USDC, I have these debt tokens that are available in my wallet too. And so in order to get back my assets, I'm going to have to pay back some of my debt to make sure my platform, my health status is good. So there's all these different contracts that are interconnected with it, with libraries and everything. So it can be overwhelming. And for this CLI, the good news is we don't really have to touch most of this because we're forking it, right? We're just forking it and deploying it. So most of our interactions are going to be with the lending pool. And that's pretty much it. That makes it really, really simple for anybody that just wants to mess around and play with it. But if you want to go deep dive, Aave kind of like changed the docs a little bit. They just have a new upgrade. So kudos to the guys that, upgraded the docs. But you can look at each one of the contracts piece by piece to see how they all interact with each other. But just for our purposes, everything we do all goes to the lending pool. Cool? Clear?
Yeah, I mean, we have a simplified version for what I understand here, which makes sense.
Yeah, it's way more complicated. I mean, just to bring it out, I'll just show you really quick here on like the
So
contract.
I actually have another question for you here, Billy, because
Yeah.
this, like, to do this thing, you really need to have some DeFi knowledge. It's not just about coding, right? So
Right.
how does a developer goes about this? Like, let's imagine that I'm deploying my first smart contract, learning
Mhm.
Solidity, then how do I get here,
My biggest piece of advice is use it, right? So like actually you spend $50 and just play with it. Again, that DeFi for me, anybody that doesn't know my history, DeFi is what inspired me to learn how to code. So before
Mhm.
like 2021, I didn't know how to code. Like I had no idea what Solidity worked or whatever. I just thought it was so cool that it was awesome. And I first started with Curve and I was like, man, this is amazing. And I started off with Viper, which is Python. And the reason I switched
Yeah.
to Solidity was because there wasn't enough tutorials to show me how to use Viper. So I was like,
Mhm.
okay, there was a lot more content in Solidity. But I just started using it. Like I fell in love with DeFi. I'm like, this has a use case for me. It makes sense to me. I learned more traditional finance through DeFi than actual
Yeah.
traditional finance, right? So like just use it and then you'll understand it. Maybe you'll get liquidated, but just $50, $10, whatever. Experiment on Metis, right? It's very cheap to do transactions there. So you can borrow land, take it out, experiment with that stuff, So
Got
I
it.
say use it, right? Like I say don't learn basketball or football from a book. Go out and play, right?
Go
You
out
can
and
learn from the
play.
book all day long, but when you go out and play, it's a totally different game.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course, of course. So you'll see like here in the contracts for Aave, I know it's a little chaotic. There's a bunch of subfolders with dependencies, deployments, protocol. Protocols pretty much has the most of it. You see that it has the lending pool and then the lending pool.sol. And you can see all the imports coming in, right? It's all these references from all these libraries. But if we look, we scroll down, you're going to start seeing, oh, there's deposit. Let's see, there's withdraw. So based on that old image, right? It has all these functions available to you based on the lending profile. So it's just a matter of going to that contract and interacting with it overall. And so, we won't go deep dive into each, contract. We only have, roughly an hour. So, we'll keep it, we'll keep it within the CLI. All right, key factors for the CLI tool, right? So the original fork was using a different Oracle. So we're going to be using API3 adapters. What does that mean? If you remember from workshop number 1, right, we have our borrow lending dApp that used to have this other Oracle. Let me bring this out. It used to bring in this Oracle, bring in the price for ETH USDC, came in a certain format, right? Like, oh, it was 8 decimals, 10 decimals. It was like, this is the standard for it. I don't want to refactor all this code, right? So what we do is we have our API3 Oracle that comes in 18 decimals and a timestamp, and we make this adapter. And then we basically, when we launch it, instead of using this other Oracle, we just have this adapter here. And so we just, remove that and make sure that API3 Oracles are feeding our borrow lending app. Oops, let me undo that and come back to this and hide this screen here. Makes sense. Let me get rid of all that too. 1 second. Let me trash that. There we go. Much better. This screen drawing is so weird for me. All right. So asset values are represented in terms of ETH or the native token, which would be Metis in this case, right? Conversions happen at the app level, meaning that it's basically lending and doing calculations based off the price of ETH, not USDC. So there's some backend calculations that have to happen. If you're running a script to check certain things, you're going to have to get the price of ETH, convert that to USD value, and then do conversions. We're not going to get into that to the liquidation part, but just, a heads up, right? Most ERC tokens are 18 decimals, but USDC is 6 decimals. USDT is 6 decimals, right? So we have these 6 decimal tokens that we have to account for. So, we're going to have to read the decimal places of tokens at times. This is already built into Aave. But again, if you're running scripts for liquidations, you're not going to, liquidate for 60,000 USDC. You want to do it for 600 USDC, right? So you want to make sure that your decimals are on point for these stable coins. You can add any token as collateral in this CLI as long as there's a price feed for it. So we're going to do Metis. We're going to do it manually. You can make any token. I can make Billy Jitsu token. I can make Victor token, whatever I want, as long as there's a price feed in existence for it, right? So to deploy an Aave contracts, you would be suggested to have a private RPC endpoint. I know for testnet, I had a hard time finding, and that's when I reached out to you for that RPC. Remember, Victor, of being able to do it. Yeah. So I was able to deploy it with the public, but because there's like 36 different contracts on here, you're deploying contract after contract, you're going to hit RPC limitations. So if you're using the free one, they're going to say, hey, you hit 10 in a second, and then they're going to stop your deployment. So you can always get like a free one depending on the chain that you're using through like QuickNode or Anchor or something like that. If you're deploying on mainnet, definitely use the ones that are on the Meta site. But for this particular case, since we're doing this, we're going to do it on testnet. So it's totally up to you. You will also need Docker to deploy the Aave contracts, right? You don't have to be a Docker expert. You just need to have Docker installed on there. If you download any Docker, latest one on there, it comes with Docker Compose and Docker on there. The reason we do this is to make sure the Solidity version that was used for Aave v2 is a little bit older. So if libraries aren't available or there's, different setup on local machines, it was very sensitive, right? So we just put it in a Docker container to make sure everybody can deploy it. So far, so good.
Yeah,
do you have questions? Please go ahead.
Yeah, this makes really sense. Like Solidity versions usually create dependencies issues, but yeah, we are using Docker, so all good.
Yeah. Question for you, Victor?
All good. All good. I just want to remind our 67 people that are watching now, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. You can ask below the main post in which we are doing the live stream, or you can ask on the chat on YouTube. So yeah, we're really looking forward to see what do you guys think about this, because we are experimenting, right? So, and it's a very unique opportunity to learn something that you won't find in many places. Like this is a very special kind of content. So thanks, Billy, again, and let's continue.
Absolutely. So right here is a link to an example. Right now, for some reason, the main one on API3's ecosystem website, GitHub, is on private. So I forked it, the not fully complete version, but fully complete for our purposes here, onto my GitHub. I put that in the private. This is the same one on the link here. In the YouTube, I'll send you the new updated one. All it is just some minor cleanups on the back end, but for our purposes of borrow lending right here, it's totally fine on here. So don't get lost. This is public for everybody to use. So this will work for all your purposes and everything. It's just a minor of some minor changes, but it's not public. So I want you guys to play with it today. So I made one public. That's it. Okay. So enough talk, blah, blah, blah. Let's build some stuff, right? So for those that are looking at the repo or that copied it over, you'll see that it looks just like this. It has a whole bunch of files. It has all the instructions you need. It has links to install Docker, Docker Compose if you're on a Linux system. Again, if you install Docker on Windows or on Mac, it'll already have Docker Compose included. If you're on a Linux unit system, it gets a little bit complicated. And it basically takes you step by step of what to do. API3 adapters, install the libraries, and let's get into the details of that, right? So let me minimize this. And you see, here's the layout. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Is that better to see?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay. And then let's go ahead. So you're going to see this top folder right here. It's called API3 adapters. This is a whole other hard hat repo that you'll be working with. Like I said, these are the contracts that we're going to use to deploy our adapters, right? So just to bring back that old picture, do I have it here? Yeah, let me bring that over here. These are the adapters that we're going to be used to deploying out our lending dApp, right? And so here in the configuration, config.json, we're going to configure the coins and the tokens that we need with the proxy contracts or pricey feeds that we're going to basically make our tokens with, right? So what tokens do we want our borrow lending dApp to support? Wrap Bitcoin is a very popular one, right? And so that is going to be our asset symbol of Wrap BTC, and the pair name is going to be Wrap BTC USDC. Proxy address is the price feed. So where do we get our price feed? Well, this is an API3 video, right? So we're going to use API3 oracles. So we're going to go over to our testnet. We're going to go over and search Metis testnet. And lo and behold, I have my Wrap BTC USD. For those that watch Workshop 1, this should be like child's play for you. And we're going to go ahead and integrate. And we're going to grab that proxy address, right? So we're going to grab that proxy address and we're going to make sure and paste it down here. So here we set up our thing. So I've already have the addresses here. You'll notice if you're doing a lot of cross-chain stuff, API3 uses create2. So a lot of the oracles are the same address, right? So if it's a Wrap BTC on Metis or Wrap BTC on Ethereum, it will probably be the same address, but always check, just in case for any issues. And so I'm going to use a mock API3 things, and you can label it whatever you want. So it doesn't have to be anything particular. So let me go back. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm just going to go back to the marketplace and I'm going to look up API3 and I'm going to go ahead and integrate that, grab that price and API3 USD and go. And so we don't need Billy Jitsu token. Oops, let me get rid of that zero in front. We don't need Billy Jitsu token at all. So that was just for fun, because there's no price feed for it, right? So if I'm looking for a price feed on something that doesn't exist, I can't legitimately do it. So, there is no Billy Jitsu token, right? But there is a Wrap Metis token, right? So if I have Metis, I have a Metis token, right? So that will be my integration. So I'm going to switch that over to show anybody that wants to add or change, a different token. You can add as many tokens as you want, or you can have it limited. So I'm just going to go Wrapped Metis, and I'm going to call it WMS. All right, and then I'll just do Metis USDC, and then I'm going to change that proxy address to the Metis price feed, right? So just in case, that is the same address as that, right? And so there are a few things that here. So we add as many tokens as we want, whatever. All you have to do is basically copy and paste, add a comma, and then make sure that the last token does not have a comma. And then here is where it gets a little complicated because we have this ETH USD proxy address. For most chains, ETH is the gas token, right? But on Metis, Metis is the gas token. So we're going to refer to ETH as Metis here. So we're going to use that same address for the proxy and make sure that we use Metis token as our gas token, right? And we want to make sure our USDC proxy is going to be safe. So we're going to go back. We're going to go out to USDC. Remember, on the back end, we convert everything to USDC. Let me grab that and copy that and make sure that we have the right USDC proxy address. Oops, helps if I copy the whole thing. So far, so good.
Good. So
Yeah.
you just replaced the address, right?
Yes, the price feed. These are all price feed addresses right here.
Okay, cool.
Right, and so I've decided to make all these different tokens on here. And so now we're going to go into the network. So here is where we do it. Now, we used to see this in a .env, but the way we tie it into the front end, it's going to refer to this file from time to time. So we're going to convert this over to the Metis L2. So I have it right here on the side. You can look it up on the docs, but you can I'm just going to copy and paste it right here. So we have 59902. I'm going to call it Metis L2. So I'm just copying and pasting from a reference that I have here, but I looked it up on the docs and copied it here. And then the RPC, again, I want you to have a private RPC for it, but on this one, the public RPC works. So we have Sepolia Metis DevOps.link, and then the name is going to be Metis. And symbols Metis. And then it's going to be wrap Metis as our wrap token. Right? Decimals are 18. And then our Explorer is this here. So you can deploy this on any L2, L1 that's supported by API3 oracles, right? So you just have to convert it here, make sure that your RPC is corrected, and you're ready to rock. So let's go ahead and check something here. So if we're following the list here, I got to find out where did I put my link. I'm just going to click my old link here. Okay, we've basically configured our assets, right? And now we want to make sure that our mnemonic is set. So here I have a mnemonic example. There's a .env example. It's a word, 12-word phrase. Why do we use a mnemonic instead of a private key? When I'm running scripts and I want to do things back and forth, I don't want to have 15 different private keys. I want to generate wallet 1, wallet 2, wallet 3 on the fly. So I'm just using a mnemonic. If you want to convert everything to private key and use a single wallet, you can. But for scripts and liquidations, I don't want to have like 20 different private keys to do things. I just want to generate wallet 1, 2, 3, 4 indefinitely. So here's mnemonic. One key factor that you have to have is you'll notice that it is a lowercase mnemonic. Just to differentiate one from the one down here. There's two different EMVs. Remember, this is a separate hard hat file that we're just going to use to deploy adapters. So go ahead.
Yeah, is it basically like we are using the whole wallet, right?
Yes, yeah, you're using every possible wallet you can generate it on. Basically, it's using version first wallet generating position 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, however you want. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we are going to basically change our position to API3 adapters. So CD API3, adapters, right? And I'm just going to install all the libraries. It's already installed for you. You don't need Docker yet because this is just an updated version of Hardhat. So it's just going to pull everything out that you need. And you'll see on the package.json, we have scripts right here. You're going to see deploy adapters. And so what that's going to do is it does a whole bunch of things on the deployment. It looks pretty complicated because it's reading some files, but it's going to deploy every one of your tokens. So every token that we made on the config file, it's going to create that token and it's going to configure a proxy adapter for it. So you don't have to do anything. It's already done for you. And it's going to set it up ready to go as a reference file. So it's going to, deploy the mock ETH. It's going to deploy everything that you need on there for you. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to go ahead and look at our package.json, and we're going to go ahead and go yarn deploy adapters. It's going to compile, and then here we go. We're going to start deploying all our tokens. And depending on the RPC quality, depends on the speed of the chain. it gets that all up and running. And so there we go. There is our ERC token. That's a wrap Bitcoin. It gives us that and the address on there. If we have any questions or anything, this is a good time because it takes a little while for this deployment's ready to go.
So I have a quick question. So
Go
you
for it,
did
go
this
for it.
deployment before on Metis, right?
Yes, yes.
Unfiltered opinion. How was the experience?
It was a little bit slower on this chain than it was on other chains, but other than that, it was fine. But because I didn't need to get a private RPC, it made it kind of easier. So it's kind of like a give and
Yes.
take of that, right? Like I didn't have to go and buy one or borrow one for a little bit or put a credit card on there, which was nice. So, you know, speed is nice, but then not having to do all the extra work is nice too. So, you know, give and take.
Trade-off,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
All good. All good. Thanks for sharing that. Nidhi, do you have any questions now? I know it has been a lot to cover, but yeah, just feel free to ask.
Yep, all good for now.
Okay. Don't worry. So we're almost there. It's deploying those tokens.
So this we are deploying with the hard hat, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
It's
not using Docker. So we're gonna use Docker for the deployment, like you said earlier, that we're gonna use Docker for all the contract deployment. I think around 13 contracts that we're gonna deploy. Is
yes.
that the thing that we are doing with the hard hat?
Well, right now, yes. So we're going to deploy it this way here for this. This is very simple. Basically, we're creating tokens and we're creating the oracles for those tokens with the adapters to reference. So all we're doing right now, let me go to that Excalibur draw, is we're doing this one right here. See this API3 adapters folder? We're just doing this right here. We're deploying this. So this will be in existence right now. That's what we're doing in the background. So I have all my tokens that are basically being minted to my wallet. And then I have this API3 Oracle that it's referring to because we set it up in the configuration. And now we're deploying all the adapters for those on there. So then it can be referenced a little bit later there.
Makes sense. So do we gonna use Docker later or it's
Yes,
all?
right now. So let me go ahead and start
Okay.
that up
Let me
right
have
here.
some questions then.
So you see that it's already done. And what you're going to see is deployment saved to references.json. If we go over to references.json, let me make this a little smaller. You're going to see that we have our assets here. So now we have our wrap BTC or mock wrap BTC, right? It is a token address, this address on Metis, right? And then we have our aggregator, our proxy, basically adapter is here. We have our token and our proxy adapter. We have our token and our proxy adapter. So what this does is basically make the tokens and the adapters for you ready to go. All the tokens have been minted to the deployer wallet. And you'll see that we have the USDC with the faucet. So like when we do liquidations and we're going to need a little extra USDC to do liquidations, I could just mint it out here from this USDC faucet. It has the adapters. Again, remember, it is in USDC of 6 decimals. And Chainlink uses 8 decimals or 10 decimals. So we have this adapter here, this adapter to USDC here. If you want to look in the details, you see it has 8 decimals. So there's a conversion rate of what gets, set down. So we've already done that all for you. So there, you don't really have to get into the details of it. But if you want to deep dive and ask questions, I'm around, but it's a lot to cover. So I'm going to, skip that. But you see that everything has been deployed out in our references. And so that we have all our mock oracles, all our tokens, it's already sitting in my wallet right now. Okay. Now that the adapters are done, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of deploying Aave, right? So I have my Docker container right here. I have Docker Compose already. So one thing about this, Windows, everything's going to work up into the front end. Apple is going to work through the whole way. WSL, like for this is why I'm using WSL right now. You'll see that I'm using Ubuntu. The front end works much better, works much smoother on Windows. So like I've switched over to WSL for this purposes. But one thing you have to notice in here is in your Docker, you want to go to your resources and WSL integration and make sure that you have this checked. So then when you're using Docker, you're not getting confused. This, I'm basically saving you an hour of confusion of why it's not working with Docker because you're using that. So definitely make sure that you have that checked out. It already has Docker Compose installed because I just used the latest version of Docker. So you don't have to do anything special, but the links are in the GitHub. But I just want to make sure to point that out to make sure that your resources, whatever version of Ubuntu you're using or WSL that you're using, make sure that's checked. So then when it does reach out to communicate with Docker, it's available to you.
Thank you
That's
so
good.
much for sharing this, because I myself spent like a lot of time on this when I was using Docker.
Yes, it is interesting, right? So
Yeah, and
the
it's important as well.
the number one thing is like saving time, right? Like this is the stuff like talk to the Docker devil, right? Which is like, so let's go ahead and go back to the main root folder. So we're back at the CLI and let's reference our positions, right? So now that we've had our adapters deployed, we're going to see that we have, our config JSON file, a references file. These reference files is what the main directory is going to use on here. And so it's going to go back to the root directory, which we are here. And then we're going to make sure that we set our mnemonic. Now, it could be the same mnemonic, it can be a different mnemonic, whatever you want. But notice that it is all caps. Why the team did this, I'm in question. Maybe that changes not, but make sure that in your main Aave folder, which is not in the adapter folder, but in here, it is in caps. You see that the mnemonic is caps on there. So I have my env file there, and it's ready to rock on there. So we are in the root folder. And so what we're going to do is we are going to do Docker compose up. So we're going to go ahead and put that to the side. And I'm just going to split this up because we're going to use multiple screens. So I'm going to go Docker compose. Helps if I spell it right. Up. And we're just going to bring it up. It takes a little while for it to get up and running, but we're just going to get that up. You should see this. This is something that you should see on the range here. And sometimes it takes a little while to get up and running. So be patient with it. We're building all that. And so as we're waiting for that to kind of complete out, you're going to see the next step is open another tab. And you're going to basically pop in this command. So I'm just going to grab this command. And it's going to load our .env into a bash file.
So quick question here. Let's assume, which is a strong assumption, but anyway, let's assume that everything goes smoothly the first time.
Yes.
How much time should I be considering to do this whole deployment?
It took me, so the deployment on Metis takes 5 to 10 minutes on here.
Okay.
But I've already prepared that. So I'm good, right? So, but yeah, depending on the speed of the network and the speed of the RPC and how fast it can go, on some networks, it takes less than a minute. On some networks, it takes 20 minutes. On East Sepolia, it took like 25 minutes. So it's just like, man, it's rough. Yeah. So let me go ahead and set this Docker. There we go. It's finishing up. It's loading up. It really depends on the speed of your machine, what the what the capabilities for the Docker is on your machine resources. Again, I'm running WSL, so there is communications going back and forth between Windows and Linux. So that's why it's a little bit slower. But I'm going to go ahead and set this up. All right, so I am ready to go. You'll see that it's ready for this input. And that's going to be the third step, is where we're actually going to do yarn run Aave full migration. So this is where it's going to basically pull all the resources, everything ready to go. So I have that pasted, yarn run Aave custom full migration. And this is where it's going to pull everything into the contracts, download the tools, grab everything you need, compiler 6.12, and then do all that. So we're going to go ahead and get that deployed in just a bit. So we're going to watch that for a little bit in silence. If you have any questions, throw it my way. I'm going to try to look at the comments to see if there's anything available, but you see it's just basically going to compile all the code. It's going to use the references from this part right here on the top on there to get you up and running. So we're just going to wait. You see that it's basically deploying address provider registry. It is, basically looking at all the references points that I have on that references.json. It's basically using that as a reference to all my tokens, what oracles are needed for what tokens, and it's basically deploying them piece by piece. So we can watch the paint dry. We can make we can all make that happen, but we're just going to wait for that to go through. And so as we're going through, I'm going to go and bring this other repo here that's already been done and kind of take you through what happened. All right, so let me get rid of this, and I'm gonna risk this to see. Hopefully it works, because I've kind of like done it halfway, but let's see. But you're gonna see at the end of the day, once it's all completed, we're gonna look at this deployed contracts JSON, and you're gonna see all the contracts that were deployed with the Aave fork using that Docker interface. So you're going to see the address, you're going to see who the deployer was, which was my wallet, and you're going to see each one of these contracts that are set here. So you see all the contracts that get deployed on here. That's why I say use a private RPC on there. So you're going to see like the ones that are important, right? And the ones that I'm going to provide scripts for is basically the lending pool, address provider. I forget where that is. Address provider here, and basically referring to the registry. So these are like kind of the most important ones on there. But you see that all the deployed contracts are based right here on the deployed contracts in your root folder. You'll see that I have my API3 adapters folder here, and then in the main one with my env, I have my deployed contracts on here. So just taking a quick look, you see that it is still moving in the background, but for speed, I've already pre-baked the cookies, and we are ready to rock on the next part. So we have deployed our contracts, and so I'm just going to go ahead and close that. And so we're going back into our configuration. And so now what we want to do is take the next step to the CLI. So far, so good. Do I have everybody? Are we following along?
Yeah, I think it's all good for now. Obviously, the best way to learn, like you mentioned before, is just go and try it. So
Yes.
I think that this is step by step that we're doing is amazing, and people are actually very happy. I see some comments of love for you, so all
Nice.
good.
Okay. Now we're going to actually get the front end, right? So we've deployed all the contracts. It's living on Metis. We want to actually get a front end up and running. We already built that for you, right? So all you have to do is do a Yarn front end code gen. What it's going to do is going to actually pull down a repo that we have on the ecosystem that's live and prepare that for you. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that out. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that right in the root. Oops. Let me type it out. Yarn front end code gen. What it's going to do is just, again, download it from the GitHub. And you see that if I scroll up, I have this API3 Aave UI interface. Let me zoom that in. You see API3 Aave UI has a full-on React interface for you, ready to go. What it's going to do is it's going to reference this configuration files to have that already laid out for you. So I'm going to go ahead and make this smaller. Go ahead.
Here, just a quick question. This is something that you guys develop only like for this purpose, or this is like a general tool that you have for front end? It's just that could be very useful.
Oh, I mean, you can fork this usable for any front end you want. You have to modify it, right? We are working on another borrow lending app that's still like under caps right now, but you can fork it and then use it for your needs. But yeah, this is a very forkable interface that you can use for borrow lending. This is a tool for everybody to use, right? I'm using this for the workshops for people to do it. Like if there's no borrow lending that you want, or someone that's a little bit more riskier on certain assets that are a little bit more degen, that no one wants to risk it, but you do, you can use you can use this, right?
Use it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally up to you on what you want to do. So we have that. And so the next step, which is kind of like the final step right here, is the Yarn front end dev. So usually you do Yarn dev. Here we're going to use Yarn front end dev, so it references all the files that are available to it. So Yarn front end and dev. And so it's going to go ahead and download all the packages, get that all up and running. Takes a little while too, because I think we're deploying. Let's see how we're looking on this other one. It's still deploying here in the back end, so it's still doing its thing. So we're just using like the maximum of my internet here to download all these different libraries. But when you hit the Yarn front end, it downloads all the packages that you need in order to get it up and running. And then we'll see the magic happen in just a little bit. If there's any questions out there, again, if you're catching it after recording, or if you're reaching out there, again, you can always hit the Twitter. You can always hit the API3 Discord. Follow API3 Twitter, or even my Twitter, and then ask me if there's a question that is just so far-fetched that I have no idea what the answer is. I will find it out with the team. But yeah, hopefully this is pretty straightforward, and hopefully you don't have too many bugs or hitches. If you do, again, we would love to know. And so I've downloaded all the packages, and it looks like it is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and open it in the browser. Let me just bring this up over here. It takes a little while for it to load. And let me make sure in this MetaMask I am in my Aave deployer. Aave v1 deployer, perfect. And you see it's pretty cheap to deploy, is like 0.0003 Metis to deploy all that. And you see that the front end is now loading right here. So right now I haven't done anything with it. You'll see that I have my wrap BTC, wrap Metis, mock API3, USDC, my mock wrapped ETH and Metis token as a default here. It is, a fresh new bank right here. We could see the markets. There is no money deposited whatsoever on this interface. It is just kind of ready to go. So let me go ahead and disconnect this. I'm going to disconnect this as well. And disconnect all connections, right? So there we go. So all you have to do, it has, the Rainbow Wallet kit on here. You can, support any wallet that you want. You can add more if you want to. You can add more wallets in the configuration of there, but MetaMask is my primary one that just works over it. I'm a big fan of Aave, but hey, for development purposes and multiple RPCs, I still use MetaMask. And there we go. So we are connected. So we want to supply certain things on here, but I want to go ahead and distribute. So this script is not available on the repo right now. This is something that I've written myself. And then also wanted to mention one thing for those that do want to write scripts, because it's a WSL. This is specifically to WSL. This is kind of like a sidetrack, and I wrote notes here as soon as I can find the notes. Give me 1 second as I look for this. And of course, I cannot find my notes. Let me see. There we go. All right. When the Docker deploys something on WSL, and this could be a Unix issue too or a Linux issue, it deploys it as root instead of my user. So when I try to do a script in a folder or file, it doesn't give me the permissions, even if I try to sudo it. So that issue I came up with is all you have to do is on the root directory of what you do is use this command for the user, and basically you change the owner rights of the directory that was deployed by the Docker instance to your user. So instead of it being root for this deployment area for the artifacts and everything, you're going to go ahead and change ownership to your user with this command here. So I'm just going to make that a little bit larger. So
But this is an issue from WSL, right?
yes, yeah, and
Okay.
it could be on Linux. I don't have a Linux system. I'm just using WSL. So if someone is having that issue with Docker, I've tried changing it in like the Docker compose to have different users, but then it's hard coded to my user, and then it became problematic. So I'm just, hey, if you're having problems, try this on the root directory, and it'll give you everything you need on there. just a heads up on there.
Nice tip.
Yeah. So let me, I'm going to go ahead and just do some scripts here. I think I created yarns on here, but just because I am crazy, let me make sure here. My package JSON, did I add? Yes. I've got to distribute. So I'm going to do yarn distribute. What I'm doing is, because the deployer only has one wallet, right? So as soon as I deploy something, all the tokens get sent to the deployer wallet, right? So it doesn't really make sense for one position to have all the tokens and then, no other wallet to liquidate. I can't, theoretically you can liquidate yourself. So that's why I have the mnemonic, so I can have multiple wallets to distribute. So what this script does is basically take my balances of all my tokens and then basically distributes 10% of it to another wallet so I can play with it. It's kind of the goal. So my second wallet has some tokens to play with because they're all sitting on this wallet. And so I don't want to add it to my MetaMask and send tokens one by one. So I just created a script that just says distribute. So whatever tokens I have when I deployed, remember they all minted to wallet 1. I just want to send some to wallet 2 so then they can play too. Right. So that's all that's happening on the script. I'm just like, whatever I have as a balance, send it over on there. Okay, let me go back into our borrow lending dApp here and then switch over to my wallet deployer too. So what I'm going to do, and I'm kind of doing this manually so everybody can see it and go flow it, because I know we are coming up into the hour, but I'm just going to send my other wallet, Aave deployer 2, has no meta, so I'm going to make sure to send some gas to it. And I'm going to send this 1 Metis on testnet as we go. Again, if you have any questions, let me know.
Yes, a good reminder. We have over 120 people, so this is a nice audience that we have here, guys. And yeah, we're doing this for you, right? So make sure you ask any questions. There are no stupid questions. Everybody here is learning. So myself, I'm learning here right now. So it's all good, guys.
Ask away, man. Ask away. Like, if I had someone to ask questions with when I was going through all this, that would have been awesome. So it's still pending on here, but we're just going to wait. And hopefully it goes through sooner than later. And that way we can just set up positions on here. So as we're waiting on that, let me see how everything else is looking. It looks like my distribution is complete. All my distros are set. Let me see what happened on this site here. There we go. Now I have some on there. So let me go ahead and come back to the browser. Okay. And so there we go. So number one rule is the bank needs to have funds in order to lend it out, right? So the bank has nothing. So as a generous person or as a market maker that I am, I'm going to go ahead and supply USDC to the bank. So that way it could be lent out. I have 90 million, right? I minted out 100 million, but I'm just going to go ahead and put like 50, not 5 million. I'll just deposit 5 million. So I'm going to go ahead and approve that.
So you're a real whale, huh?
Yeah, you could mint as many tokens as you want. I'll go ahead and approve everything just to make it faster. But yeah, you basically are a virtual well. Well, you can make as many tokens as you want. You can liquidate for $100 million, $10 million, whatever you want. Create all these scenarios on here. And again, this is all a front end that you can fork and use for your purposes. Let me go ahead and pop that.
Is this USDC that we created on the contract deployment?
Yes, that is. If we go back here to the API3 adapters and we go to the references, you'll see that that is the USDC with faucet that we created based on the configurations that we set with the USDC proxy address.
Okay.
Yeah. So that goes back to the original adapters.
So is it like it will connect to front end automatically, or we have to like
Automatically.
That's good.
Yeah. So it's already basically when it deploys, it mints to your wallet. And then if you have to like add it to your MetaMask, that's why it's a pain. So I made the scripts to distribute everything way easier. Because if I had 100 tokens, imagine adding it to your MetaMask, sending it to a different wallet and everything. So I just like what tokens are created based on the reference, distribute it to another wallet. You can distribute it to 10 wallets if you want. You know, it really depends on your scripting on there. So you see that now that the market has $5 million available. If I go to the markets, there is $5 million supplied in my borrow lending app. It's all USDC. But that's not how we want to play. Let's go ahead and disconnect that. We want to switch to our Aave V2 because we are not the market maker. We are just the average user. Let me disconnect this and disconnect. And so I want to connect my Aave V2 deployer wallet. Aave V2, perfect. And let's go to the dashboard and you see that I have no net worth, right? And so now I just want to, you know, borrow some money. I have, let's say, some mock API3. Let's just say I want 100,000 of that, you know, whatever value it is at whatever the current price is. I'm going to go ahead and deposit that. I can earn yield on that. You know, I could just deposit it on there. Again, for those that are not aware, there's always smart contract risk, right? So like if this gets hacked, I have these A tokens in my wallet for 100,000, but if the funds are gone, they're gone, right? Like it's getting poker chips, but the casino got robbed, right? The poker chips are, are worthless, right? So make sure that every time you deposit something, there is that smart contract risk. Aave V2 has been quite battle tested, so people have a lot of faith on it. You know, and just like any other one, like Compound or anything, the longer they are, the more TVL they have. Theoretically, people feel safer with it. But there is always that smart contract risk. So know when you're depositing something, it's no longer in your wallet, it's in a smart contract, right? So one of the strategies that I do, like if I'm trying to, you know, work something or leverage something, is when I deposit something, I borrow something out, right? And so right now I have 100K available on here, right? And so what can I borrow? I can borrow my API3 again if I really wanted to, that's available, or I can borrow the USDC that's in the bank, right? You'll notice that I cannot borrow any wrap BTC, wrap Metis or anything because nobody has supplied it, right? So that's where the economy works, right? I have to incentivize users to, you know, deposit the wrap BTC, the wrap Metis in order to do something, whether that's maybe a token drop or, you know, some kind of high APY or whatever. I need to incentivize users to put this so people can borrow it out and generate some market, right? So now that I've used API3, I want to go ahead and borrow USDC, right? I want to leverage that position. I don't want to sell any API3. I believe that it'll go up in value. So I just want to, borrow some USDC so I can do something else, maybe buy more API3 or whatever I want. And so I'm going to go ahead and borrow it. And so you'll see that I deposited $100,000 of $100,000 in API3. Current price, I don't know. Don't really care about token price, but let me see what what the actual price is right now, just for our purposes. Let me click. There we go. Can I cannot click here? There we go. So we go here, search for API3. I don't know why it's saying I'm not on the testnet, but okay. And let me go for API3. And so currently 100,000 is about $137,000 roughly is what it's worth. So I can borrow 75% of that, which is $95,000, right? So that's just max leverage, right? You'll see that my health factor is 1.08. Remember our original formula? Let me go back to those notes.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Let me see. Where is my Excalibur draw? There we go. Let's scroll this down. Remember, my value times liquidation threshold divided by my debt, right? My value is about 130. My liquidation threshold, if we look at it, it's about 75%. And the way we look at that is through the Aave notes. So let me look through my Aave notes. I have so many windows up and running here. It's just crazy. Let me go here. There we go. And you'll see that on Aave in their docs, they have a parameter dashboard. They have different parameters for different assets on here. You'll see USDT, RAT BTC. You'll see that their LTV differs for each one of them. 72%, 82%, it goes on and on. So you can always check what the DAO decides for their LTVs, if they even want to lend against it, right? Sometimes it's too risky for them, so you can't use it as a leverage position. But you see that USDC 75%. For our cases, I've made everything 75%. So I can borrow 75%, so 0.75. So basically my 130 times 0.75 divided by my debt gives me this value of about 108. So I have liquidation at less than one value. Makes sense? So I'm going to go ahead and just max leverage. This will reduce my health factor. If I borrowed less, let's say 50. Now you see how then every time I add another number here, it just gets, it's pretty large health number. But if I max it out, this is as max as I can go. Let's go ahead and borrow it. We're crazy. And we've degened our way out to this. And so now if the price, and this is where I keep you in suspense for the next workshop, if the price of API3 falls, right? If this goes down to like $1.20, $1.10, well, now this formula kicks in, right? I still have all this USDC in my pocket and I haven't paid back my loan, but this is my collateral. Now I'm in a very, very bad position where my health ratio is below 1 and I can be liquidated for a percentage of my stake. So this is the way the game is played. So I can either not borrow as much or I can pay back the loan if I see the value dropping. So like when you see these markets, when they change, let's just like check CoinGecko. When these markets change and you look on Twitter or anything, and then you see, oh, look, there is, $10 million in liquidations happened in the last hour. That's because prices fall or prices increase, right? And so when you have a quick drop and people don't pay back their loan, their leverage position becomes liquidable, right? And that's where the API3 OEV kicks in, right? Because people want to liquidate. And so, I can liquidate this position for $10 million at 24.45. And if I do that OEV bid, I can liquidate and then win that 5% bid. So when you have a max leverage position and your health factor drops below the 1, that's when you start losing that percentage. And that's going to be what we're going to do on our next workshop, right? You can see that my net worth is no longer, crazy value. I only have about 32% here available. The rest right now is in USDC. So if I repay that, I'm good. My health factor is above, but we're going to see how OEV can then update that price feed to the most exact price and then do a liquidation.
Question for you, Billy. So this was a masterclass really on DeFi, and I really appreciate you for sharing here with the Metis community. How can I kind of minimize my risk? I mean, I know that there are some risks associated, obviously, to the smart contracts and all that part, but then on the DeFi side, I'm asking, like, what can I do?
Well, you don't have to borrow as much. And so what I tend to do is not borrow the full 75%. So let me go ahead and repay some of that back. I'll pay like, oops. Let me repay some of this back to increase my that, right? So like I have more flexibility. See how it's 1.2. So I'll borrow less than what I maximum can. So like that way I am not in danger. So if I'm sleeping and then the price falls, I can wake up and see, oh, I didn't get liquidated, right? Like there's a certain range. Maybe I don't want to do the full 75%. Maybe I want to do 60% or 50%. And that gives me a bit of range. But I always tend to borrow something, because if there is a hack, I only lose, 35% versus 100%, So it's like there's always that risk. Or maybe I want to play a position where like I want to buy more of a certain token because I believe it'll go up, but I don't want to sell my, my meta stack, or I don't want, because I believe it's going to go up, but I need more money. I can use this as a position to buy more using the stable coins. And again, if more people borrow, the rates change. You'll see that, certain APIs change. Like sometimes it goes up to like 50% because there's not enough in the bank. And so there's mechanisms in here that's like, if there's not enough deposited and too many borrows, then the interest rate gets higher. And so like it forces people to pay back. There's people like, maybe there's a big withdrawal and now there's less. So there's always this constantly moving thing to make things healthy. And in order to keep the platform healthy, liquidators have to be incentivized to pay this back. So I don't max borrow all the time unless I strongly believe that the value of the token will go up. But sometimes things happen, right? You have a flash crash and then all of a sudden those happy. So like I'm always conservative. I'm conservative where I don't borrow as much as I can. So I can borrow way more. Like I can borrow, $10,000 more, but I don't, because if the price goes down, then my position health factor goes down too with it. So it's a very dangerous position to play. I'm degen to a certain extent. Some people have more risk taste, than I do. So I tend to go not as max value. So this is the perfect opportunity to play with it, because you have your own borrow lending dApp. You now have the ability to deploy it yourself. You can supply your own tokens. You can see how all that works. And then you have the ability to liquidate the positions at your own convenience, because it's your own borrow lending dApp, right? You're not fighting with other people and like, oh, did it work? Did it not work? Here you have your own borrow lending dApps. I have scripts. I'll give you like a sneak peek into my scripts on here as to like what I built. This isn't part of the repo because I want to keep it as simple as possible, but like I have all this liquidations and these token reserve checkers and updating the OEV mark price. I have the flash loan scripts that will run through the flash loans to borrow off the same platform with the money that's already there. So as you get into and as we get deeper into the course, this is where you really want to get your hands dirty and start playing with the repos and understand, like if you were just cruising by, start playing with the API price feed, start playing with the OEV, and then start understanding, because we're getting deeper and deeper. Like each one gets harder and harder, right? If you notice, the first one was super easy, right? We did it in like 10 minutes, and then we talked about adapters, and then the OEV took about an hour to explain the concept of why it's important. Now we're getting into this borrow lending. All we did was just basically send a borrow lending, right? We just deposited something and we borrowed something out, right? And we deployed it out. It's kind of step by step. We've abstracted all the difficulty away from you. So now you can deploy this, wherever you want with your own logos or whatever. You can adjust the front end, but, keep the API3 on there for me. But, it's a very powerful tool that allows you to experiment with DeFi, play with fake money. You're not scrounging around for testnet tokens that are supported by this dApp or that dApp. You run all the tokens. So it's a very powerful tool to learn DeFi, borrow lending, see the risk assessments of every token. If you want to deep dive, turn on the fee switch for token holders, like everything that you can do on here, it gives you an open gateway to experiment with borrow lending. I'm a big proponent for DeFi. Like I DevRel for DeFi. It's like my thing. So like, I feel like this is like one of the best product market fits for like cryptocurrency and blockchain
100%.
because of state management. So like, nowhere else in the world can you borrow $10 million for 12 seconds to create some opportunity for you and then pay it back, without having any money whatsoever. So like, this is opportunity, right? Liquidations happen when there's market change. So like, whether you have, like $100 in the bank or $100,000 in the bank. If you have a laptop and some skill, you can make some legit money, right? So like this is skills that literally pay your bills on there. So yeah, like that's kind of like what excites me the most, and like kind of like motivated me to start this workshop series for developers that are interested on there. I mean, how many teams would love to have a liquidator on their team, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Billy. It's like
Yeah.
I have to say this is like the best content that I've seen related to kind of DeFi from the developer side, right?
Yep.
By far the best
Yeah.
thing that I've seen. So I really appreciate that. And since we are over the hour here, Nidhi, do you have any final questions here?
We are good. I'm good.
Okay.
You're good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to cover this material later in our internal sessions. We are going to be talking about this more and see what we can do, because you know what? I have to teach people that are in Web 2 about like Web 3, right? And it's easy for me to go over the like Solidity part and the intro and MetaMask and all that. But when it comes to DeFi, this material for me personally is going to be gold. So thank you so much again, Billy Jitsu. I'm very, very excited about doing our next session. I don't know when we are gonna do that, because we have to go to DEF CON and meet there and do some other stuff there. But I'm pretty sure that this series of workshops are gonna keep improving, and people are going to follow along. So for the people in our audience, if you have any other questions, I think you can leave them on the comments. We're gonna be checking everything. So far, I see people very happy. Billy, I love you, man. I can see here people saying very useful. So we will see how everything evolves. Definitely, this is a material that will stay there, and people will be able to check it out later. So once again, Billy Jitsu, thank you so much.
Yep. Yeah. For those that are questions, check out the GitHub repo. I think there's a link to the Discord, or again, follow the Twitter. Hit my Twitter and I can get you to the right people just in case. I can answer most questions on there because I've been running the scripts. But yeah, stay tuned, play around with it so you can understand how to do the liquidations. We're going to do the liquidations with just tokens in our wallet, and then we're going to do liquidations with OEV, and then we're going to like set it up for flash loans. So again, check out workshop 1 and 2. Once the privatized GitHub repo on the API3 ecosystem goes live, I will send that over to you guys, so then you can put it on the YouTube. So that gets the most latest and greatest version of this repo. But you can see it all works. It's just some finer details on there. Yeah.
Of course. Okay, thank you so much, guys, and make sure you follow Metis, and of course follow API3 and connect with us on social. I have to chill here a little bit before ending the stream. So thanks so much, guys. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Hi guys.
Well, this was